Alright, hello. Thank you for clicking on this video. Like the title says, this can be my opinions, advice, pros and cons of working in a hostel or volunteering in a hostel. So to give you some context, I volunteered at a hostel in Florida for 10 months last year, so I'd say I'm pretty qualified. That's way longer than the average person volunteers at a hostel. So I do think I have some good advice to offer. The big questions are, how many hours a week are you expected to work? What is the work consisting of? Is it sweeping? Is it cleaning bathrooms? Is it painting a fence, doing social media? How many other volunteers are there? That's a big one. I would say even if it's a small hostel, I think it's a big red flag if you're the only worker there. You need to have at least one other person, whether the hostel is made for 10 people or 40. Another very important set of questions is look at the living quarters. I would not recommend going anywhere until you know what your room looks like. I would not go until you have a video and pictures of your room. I say this because most of the time when you stay in a hostel, it's going to be for free room and board. But the thing is they're probably going to give you the lowest quality room they have, because why would they want to give their most expensive or private room to someone who's staying there for free? The one I stayed at in Florida had decent employee living. It definitely wasn't amazing, but I've been to other hostels where it was terrible. Like, I literally left and never came back because the employee housing was that bad, and that was my fault for not doing a background check because I was kind of new to this. And then also, how many days off are you going to get? You should definitely ask that. If you don't have an hour agreement set out before you land, I seriously would reconsider, because a lot of hostels, terribly to say so, are kind of predatory, where they'll say, oh yeah, you can stay here and you can work, but the workload is crazy just because they're giving you free rent. So definitely don't go. You can make your own decisions about how many days off you want, but don't ever go anywhere that says, oh, we might have 1 day off a week, or we try to give you one. If you don't minimum in writing get 1 day, I would honestly say 2 days off a week, don't go unless the workload is very minimal, like 2 hours a day. Another thing, this kind of bounces off the last one, but do not expect to get a private room. You might get a private room with other employees, like not guests, but don't expect just you to have your own room. That's very rare. I don't know of anyone else who I've talked to personally who have had that experience. I actually was going to be going to another hostel where they offered private rooms, but it was like the most rundown place ever. So don't expect to get a private room, and honestly, I would say don't even try to volunteer at a hostel if you are not a very social person. If you absolutely need like private time for hours a day without being bothered, honestly, this is not for you. Some other things to consider are, how often can you do laundry, and what are you going to do for another job? I understand if you're in another country, you're traveling internationally, you're probably not going to work, so that would be fine. But I volunteered in a hostel in the US, so even though it was free to stay there, I still needed to make money. So you need to talk to them about another job schedule potentially, unless you're very lucky and you don't need to work, which you are a rare one, but you need to know where are you going to work other than that, and how are you going to balance that schedule. Now, some normal things, I would say, I might have said this before, free breakfast should be included. Again, I would say that's like kind of a red flag. If they don't at least offer you breakfast, that is not a good sign, because most hostels breakfast is free for the guests, so it should be for you too. If you happen to get a hostel that will give you free lunch or all 3 free meals, again, that's amazing. That shouldn't be the only thing you look for, but consider yourself lucky, because normally it's just free breakfast. So I know people say this a lot, but I really think it is what you make it. You don't have to be the most social person on planet Earth, but if you can't open up to new experiences and go places with new people, you're really taking it for granted, and you're not getting the best experience that you should experience. I think volunteering in hostels is amazing, but I do think you should have all the facts and be honest with yourself before going. Some of the cons, I think I mentioned this before, but they could be pretty predatory. Like, no one, in my opinion, and I think this is pretty standard, 30 hours a week is too much. Another con, and honestly, this was the one that bothered me the most. I think everyone who's ever stayed or worked in a hostel can relate, but this was my biggest pet peeve, is often it was very hard to separate work from leisure when at the hostel. Because when people know you're a volunteer and the owners know you're there, if a problem arises and you know how to fix it, you can't just, oh, I'm not on the clock, I can't work, right? So big examples of this was if I was hanging out with the whole crew and like a bunch of guests and we were all hanging out and having a good time. If a guest says, oh, hey, I need a towel, or oh, my bed sheet is dirty, or oh, this is dirty, or this needs fixed, you are expected to handle that because you know how to and you are a volunteer. But just know that if you are a volunteer there and you're hanging out with the group, it's not going to be major work, but there's going to be a lot of times where instead of drinking with the guests or partying or hot tubbing or whatever, there's going to be, oh, I need a towel. Hey, this person's checking in and the other guy isn't here. Can you step in really quick? It's never going to be something that takes up 30 minutes of time, but it can get very frustrating, especially when those things pile up, where it's the 10th time in 45 minutes you got to get up and go get someone a towel or go unlock the room or check the bathroom, stuff like that. So overall, I would recommend working in a hostel. I think it's a great thing. I think you can and will save money on traveling and you will meet new people. And then another thing, bouncing off the being social point, you should expect to meet all walks of life, and that is good or bad. Obviously, a majority of the people you're going to meet in a hostel are going to be travelers. Sometimes there's musicians. I would actually say a good amount of time. Like, don't be surprised if when you go to a hostel, there's like a piano or guitars, and there are a lot of people who can play. That's awesome. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are going to be people who are alcoholics, who are drunks, who maybe might be using other drugs. That is definitely not the norm, and I'm not trying to discourage you, but you have to realize that before you go. Just like in public when you're walking down the street, not every single person is going to be like a super cheerful, jolly, wanting to do everything by the book type of person, so you should really think about that. One good way to get acclimated into your city, or at least your hostel, is I would say participate in group nights. If there's any type of group night, whether it's dance classes, I know those are pretty common. My hostel did like Taco Tuesdays, so every Tuesday it still was like $4 or $5, but you pitched that and then basically you could eat more or less however much you want and the whole hostel would come out for that. That is a great way not only to break the ice between you and your fellow volunteers that you're going to be working with and living with, but also just meeting guests. And that takes me to my next point, which is say yes to everything. I probably already have been throughout this video, but I will show you some pictures and videos somewhere here. Just because I said yes to hanging out with pretty much any guest who volunteered with me, I went to my first NHL game, which is professional hockey. I went to my first MLB game, baseball. I went to concerts, new bars, multiple beaches, different cities, and I even met some people and traveled to other states to meet up with them later, just because I developed a friendship with them in their 3 to 5 days that they might be there. Some more advice I would say is try to be good at stuff that isn't just cleaning, because the hostel I was at, which is not good, I honestly wouldn't recommend that. But you should try to be in a position where you are more or less just doing one or two things. If you're going to a hostel where they're like, okay, you're going to be doing like a little bit of checking in and checking out and some cleaning and some hosting events, they're going to expect you more or less to do like everything. Not saying that's a deal breaker, but you definitely should try to be dialed in. Like, okay, I'm a really good painter, so I will do this for a certain amount of hours and then I will paint for you, right? And I also would just recommend that because there were many times where I worked at the hostel, I was basically just a cleaner. And so I would be cleaning bathrooms and rooms, which wasn't terrible. It's not the end of the world. And so as I would clean these rooms and be sweaty and stuff, I would come outside and there would be someone painting the deck, for example, or drawing a mural. And they would do that for a few hours and get like a week's worth of stays. So if you're going to stay there long term, that might not be super viable. But if you just want to stay at a hostel for like a week or two and you have those good skill sets of like making social media, building a website, being a painter, drawing, stuff like that, you could definitely look into that. Not every hostel volunteer has to just be someone who cleans. So some pros are obviously you get free accommodation. If you ever are volunteering at a hostel and they offer like a discounted rate, run away. If you're not getting free accommodation is the bare minimum for being a volunteer. If you are volunteering for someone and they're giving you a discounted rate, or you can only stay for free an X amount and then pay that, there is no point in you wasting your time or energy. Another pro is it's a great way to explore the city or the state or the country that you're in. When I first went down to volunteer in Florida, I had only ever been to Orlando. And after my stint for 10 months, I had seen Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Lakeland, Orlando again, Miami, Fort Myers, the Keys, Jupiter, Florida, sort of near Daytona Beach, all that type of stuff, Fort Lauderdale. So it's a great opportunity to see the expanding area, state, or even country. So yeah, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. If you like this video, I'm going to be making a bunch more content. I don't really want to limit my channel to like one category. You can tell my name is Tory's Side Quests. So I like to just do random stuff like parties, hiking, fishing, camping, road trips, hostel. I'm going to make a video on like how to work at DoorDash and Jimmy John's and all that stuff. But overall, I would say my channel more or less is going to be centered kind of around like travel content. At least that's like the heavy focus. But if this video helped you out at all, please drop a like. If you're watching this far into the video, I'm assuming you enjoyed what you watched, so please consider subscribing. I really am trying to grow my channel. Comment down below anything, questions, comments, concerns. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.